Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Tell Me Everything Frog Girl Fridays. I'm your host, Danielle Spinelli. I have Scott Cornell with us. This is the last part of our series. So if you have not caught the other four, be sure to check them all out. It is a mini series of all things cargo theft and giving you that information from Frog Girl and what I like to call the king of preventing and finding cargo theft. Scott Cornell. That's quite a title, but the king of cargo theft, of preventing cargo theft. I don't know. Anyways, we're going to come up with a better name. ChatGPT will help me with that part. Anyways, this episode, we're going over if you do have a cargo theft happen to you, what do you do? I think that's the scariest part of the whole wide world. You're up all night, you're freaking out, you don't know what to do. Even making a report is scary. Sometimes you get turned down by the police. And so it's like, how do I even make a report? What are my best chances of trying to make a recovery, trying to at least file something so that I can get, money back or whatever. There's so many different avenues on this. So I'm so glad Scott's here to help me break that down because he's way more knowledgeable than I am. And so it's been really an honor to have him part of the series and picking his brain. And he's just amazing. We'll be sure to plug in the TAPA piece at the very end of it. If you're not part of TAPA, highly, 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 highly suggest doing the courses I keep bringing up in this series. We can only talk about so much online and there's a lot we can't. So if you are part of our closed network that is vetted at TAPA, then you can learn a lot more. So be sure to do that. If you guys see me or Scott at any TAPA conference or any conference, be sure to come say hi. Scott's an amazing resource to have on your team. So yeah, let's jump in it. I will do an intro separately, but why don't you really quick do an intro on yourself and then I can just plug that into each one.
Okay. Yeah. So, Scott Cornell, I'm the Chief Risk Officer for SPG and Innova Logistics, which will be SPG Cargo and Logistics at some point. And I am currently the chairman of TAPA Americas. I have about a 33-year background in cargo theft investigations and supply chain security. So I've been doing it for a long time. And of course, you and I met years ago at some of the conferences and we've been friends since.
Yeah. And you're at every single conference and usually you pop in and do your whole spiel and educate everybody and everyone's like jaws dropped and like what's going on and then you're just like got to catch a flight and roll out.
I'm just trying. I'm trying to make sure that everybody's sharing information, right? And
Yeah.
one of the things I point out is when I speak, a lot of times the information I'm bringing to the presentation comes from other people who are, anxious for me to share it and share the intel. So I think the industry
Yeah.
is doing a good job of trying to share intel.
Yeah. I love it. Well, let's jump into this episode where we're talking about how, like, I just got hit with cargo theft. We can go into the different types too on how to, if that's being handled differently, which I think it should be. That's kind of why we need to categorize it into the straight theft and strategic theft that should be handled differently. But like, I think that's the hardest part is when it happens. There's a lot of delay that happens within the brokerage, and there's lots of finger pointing. And there's a
Right.
lot of like, oh, this guy faked a breakdown, and maybe he's legit, and maybe this because there's so many it happens all the time. Like, it happens all the time where drivers go MIA because they want to go see their girlfriend and they don't want to get their phone blown. Or
Yep.
they do break down and they're scared of getting yelled at by somebody because a broker mistreats them whenever they do break down. There's so many different things in the industry and the bad guys know these things. And so I guess let's break down how if I'm either suspicious of a cargo theft coming into play or something's happening, my freight's who knows where, what do I do at that point? And then once I confirmed, yeah, this is for sure gone, what do I do from that point? And then also I want to make sure we touch on if a load's being held hostage, how do I navigate that?
Yeah.
Lots of
So
things.
a lot to unpack here, right? A
Yeah.
lot of different things. So I think, let's start with it's very confusing for
Mhm.
people, right? We talked previously about the fact that there's so many different methods, right? We went from roughly two methods of strategic theft when it first came into the industry to there's 20 to 30 different methods right now,
Yeah.
right? And it's very confusing for people. So, I speak at conferences or on panels and we get to the Q&A part at the end and inevitably somebody always wants to talk to me about an incident that they dealt with or that they went through. And what I'm finding now more so than ever is that the average person is struggling to tell me how they were stolen from.
Right.
And then I have to ask them questions to kind of get to, okay, I think this is the method that was used against you, or this is the method that was used against you, right?
Yeah. Interesting.
So I think it's very confusing. The second thing is time is of the essence. We talk about this all the time, right? And Gary Thomas from CargoNet and I were talking at JG's conference the other day about the fact that you can't even treat a breakdown like a breakdown anymore. We're in such a bad spot with cargo theft right now, being at all-time highs and being a daily driver of what we do and how we do it, that when somebody tells you that they have an engine light or they have a breakdown, they have a radiator leak, or they have, you've heard the excuses over and over again.
Mhm.
You can't take them at their word at this point. You have to
Yeah.
begin to look at it and treat it as though it's a theft. And if it ends up not being a theft, great. Everybody take a breather, take a sigh of
Yeah.
relief. That's great. But if it is a theft and you let them delay you for 2, 3, 4 days, it becomes a real problem, right? So,
Right.
our mutual friend Keith Lewis, he told me that he allegedly says it's not the first 48 hours, the first 48 minutes. I've never heard him say that before, but I'll let
He
him,
did he did say
I
that
know
at the
he
TLC
said it to you, so
conference.
you would know, right? But he's
Yeah.
never said it. I'm with the guy all the time. I haven't seen him. I haven't heard him, right? But I'll
Yeah.
tell you, I think it's a great point, right? It
Mhm.
is one of the things, and I think you've seen me do this when I speak, is at the end, I'll say, everybody in this room who has a plan, who if they were told right now that their company was experiencing a cargo theft and they had a plan and everybody at their company knows what to do because that plan is in place, raise your hand. And I'll get 3 or 4 people in a room
Right.
of 200 that raise their hand, right? And that's a big part of this problem that we're talking about right
Yeah.
now. If you don't have a plan, it becomes a mad scramble.
Lee.
Who's going to get the paperwork? Who's going to call the police? Who makes contact with the customer? Who's calling an investigator? Who's calling the insurance company? Who's calling, and all of a sudden you're trying to figure this all out while you're trying to figure out if you're having a theft, how you've been stolen from, where
Yeah.
it is, how do we get in touch with the driver? Let's get in touch with the shipper did they get the driver's phone number? It's a total mad scramble, right? And I
Totally.
equate it to, I've coached football for decades, right? And imagine I show up at a game night on Friday and I say, okay, guys, we're going to draw all the plays in the dirt right before we go on the field.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to know what they're doing, right? And it's going to be a
Right.
complete mess. And that's really what it equates to.
Totally. And I think not only having a process, making sure like everybody in the company understands it too, because sometimes it could be at a very low level employee that recognizes something weird's going on and they get
Right.
that eerie feeling. And I think that encouraging that behavior too, where instead of, hey, this got stolen and finger pointing and getting mad at people or firing people or this and that, taking those opportunities as learning experiences. And then whenever something does get caught, treating that with like lots of celebration. And, people are going to work where they're encouraged.
Talk
That's
about that
important.
all the time, that you need to train that frontline staff, right? Like,
Yeah.
when you go back to your days when you were the one booking the freight, right? Somebody should have, and maybe they did in your case, but somebody should have trained you on the red flags to spot at that moment. All too often we see maybe 3 people at a company or 2 people at a
Yep.
company are the people that know about cargo theft. They're not the ones dealing with it all day. They're
For
not the
sure.
ones that are talking to the bad guys on the phone unknowingly or, you know, dealing with somebody who's impersonating a truck driver. It's that staff that needs to be taught the red flags. So to your point, they raise a hand. We're not trying to make them experts. We're just trying to get them. I always say, we're trying to
Aware.
a spider sense,
Yep.
right? So that they raise their hand and go, hey, Danielle, can you come over and take a closer look at this? I think I got something funny going on.
Right.
And that should be encouraged, and that type of behavior should be rewarded.
Yeah, I mean, so my company, luckily they did teach us on all the things, but one of the ones that I specifically remember was whenever the whole sister, like check out my sister MC. I didn't know that that was like something that happened all the time, and so I was, in the bullpen or whatever covering freight, and this guy was like, "Well, check out this MC." Oh, and I go, "Okay, what's this? What's the other MC?" And then my coworker was like, "What are you doing?" When they say that, that's like big red flag, and I'm like, "Wait, what?" I didn't,
Yeah.
and it's just like those simple little cues that like I should have known because I was doing at that point probably for like 5 years. I should have known that.
Right.
But without having those type of conversations of like, well, what are you guys hearing on Dayline? What about this? What about that? Or
Right.
having like those, especially if everyone's remote, you're not catching each other over the cubicle wall,
Right.
telling somebody something you shouldn't.
Right.
So yeah, I think that, and then also practicing when you do have a cargo theft, like when it's a slow time, like having like a mock, a fake,
Yeah.
theft
Tabletop.
happened. Yeah.
Tabletop exercise. Chuck Forsythe trains people on this. I've trained clients on it. I encourage clients that you do this 2 to 3 times a year. It's part of the freight broker security requirements for TAPA, right? Is that you do postmortems on thefts, or you do roundtable exercises or tabletop exercises to practice.
Yeah.
Does everybody know what to do the minute you think you have a theft, right? And see how everybody reacts. And I always say, if you want to do one Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, that's fine. But you have to do one at a very inconvenient time, 9 o'clock
Hmm.
on a Friday. 7 a.m. on a Saturday, something like that, because cargo theft is not a 9 to 5 gig, right?
Right.
It's going to be inconvenient almost every time.
Right. Which to that point, just to add in there, another thing that's super important is having that after hours person, not only on the customer or not on the broker side, but on the shipper side too, because whenever they recover the freight, if they ever recover the freight, that's a low percentage, but maybe we'll be getting better.
Right.
What do they do with it? And I
Right.
think another thing, just to kind of circle back, is the time constraint too. I think one of the things that's the scariest part as a broker is calling your shipper and saying, I may or may not have a theft. I don't know. And I mean, you're basically just like saying that you failed, right? And the shipper gets super pissed off. You lose all your freight for the day. I mean, it can be devastating to a company just by saying, I possibly think this has happened. I don't know yet.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of culture we should figure out a way to change that in some way. But yeah, so as soon as I get the inkling of like this guy's faking a breakdown, what are some ways that I guess I don't really want to say like how do you bet if they're broken down because then they'll copy this. But what do I do?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different things you can do, right? So I think you have to have, as part of your plan, you have to have resources that you can reach out to, right? Whether
Hmm.
it's, you're a member of CargoNet, you call CargoNet and they can help you, right? Or, like with my clients, they can call me or they can call somebody from my team and we'll start to work with them, right? And I always say, even if you're not sure it's a theft, call me, because I go back to my comment earlier. If it ends up not being a theft, great, we can all take a breath, right? But if it is a theft, the sooner the better,
Right.
right? So I have several clients, or I've seen several people in the industry who the driver says, hey, we're broken down at this truck stop on this route, right? And
Mhm.
you can either get somebody from security company or a PI or another truck driver that, if you have other trucks in your fleet or somebody, right, that can check and see if that person is there. Is there somebody in the area that can swing through, right? I've even seen law enforcement do that occasionally, which, they don't have the time to do that occasionally. So don't take this as just ask law enforcement to swing by for you because they're busy, right?
But
But I've
sometimes
seen
you
it
can even
happen.
yeah, and you can call the truck stop too. I mean, they definitely don't like to do
Right.
it, but I've done that and they've done it. I mean, like I usually, send them money over, like send them a gift card or something. But yeah.
But it's a great point, right? Be resourceful,
Hmm.
right? Figure out a way to have that checked out, right? And again, you can hire a local PI, even if they're not, if you're just trying to see if that truck is in the truck stop, that PI doesn't have to be a cargo theft expert. They don't have to be anything like
Right.
that. Because you're just trying to document, is that truck there? But find a resource where you can try and validate that they are where they say they are. And the minute you validate that they're not, you have a theft, even if they say no, because I just dealt with one last week where it's just, no, 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 you got the wrong truck stop. We're at the one further down the road. Baloney,
Yeah.
right? At this point, it's become a game for them and they're just trying to delay you. So now you have to react and treat it as though it's a theft. But you want to trust but verify type of thing,
Right.
right? But always make sure you're verifying what you're being told.
Totally. Yeah. Or even calling the shop too. I know that's another one. But making sure you don't get the shop number from the driver. Make sure it's legitimately online.
Right.
That's another big thing.
Yeah, get
Yeah.
that, but also take, if they send you a picture, right? Like
Yeah.
I've seen some of the pictures out there. If you just throw it in AI, it'll show you that it's been, that image has been on Google for 5 years or something
Yeah.
like that, right? So, you have to verify all this information.
Yeah. And another big one too is like a flat tire or something and they're on the middle of the road and they're not at a truck stop. That's another hard one I know to detect, finding out who their roadside is. And my old company went as far as we would actually just send somebody out for them and we would have like whoever, like a tow company or whatever, we'd pay them just to drive by, see if
Yep.
they're actually there. I mean, there's lots of resources you can do. And yeah, you may have to pay for $100 to a tow company to drive by somewhere and just say, yeah, this guy's actually here. But think about what that could cost in the interim.
It goes back to exactly what we've always said, right? It's that they're really good at return on investment. We have to be good at return on investment, right?
Right.
So to your point, if it costs $100 to send somebody out there and they verify that the person is not where they say they are, now you're basically in chase, right? And if you have a $200,000 load and that $100 you just spent ends up helping you recover the load,
Yeah.
then that's a great return on investment. I worked a case a couple of months ago where I had somebody that knows me and I've worked with in the past, and they reached out right away. Hey, I think I have a theft going on. This guy's telling me, that he's in Tonopah, Arizona, and I'm saying, well, where's what's the route here? It's picked up in Cleveland going to Kingman. And I'm like, okay, they have no business being south of the 40 in the first place,
Right.
right? But the driver's giving them all sorts of reasons why he's there or whatever. And I said, okay, have him send you a picture of him with the load, right, and the truck. So you kind of get, proof of life of your load, so to speak, right?
Right.
So sends the picture, and then the guy sends me the picture, and I look at it and I go, well, he's not in Tonopah. And he says, well, it looks like the desert. I go, it is, but in 3 directions in Tonopah, you'd have mountains in your background, and he
Interesting.
has no mountains in the background, right? So he's not in Tonopah, right? So then they work and they end up getting a ping on the ELD, and the ELD ends up being down in Phoenix, right? And then we're able to get law enforcement to respond, and law enforcement ends up catching them as they're offloading the load
Well,
and getting a recovery and everything like that, right? So that's the time is of the essence element, right? That goes back to that
yeah.
instantaneously. The minute you feel like something is wrong, you have to act on it. And if we're all wrong and it's going to be delivered, that's great.
Right. So I determined, yes, for sure, this guy, he's totally lying to me, whatever I need. And I think, like, real fast before we kind of get there, there's like a good checklist. I know, like, the California Highway Patrol, they kind of provided it to me. I'm be adding this to the resources for this episode, but you need like a checklist of all the information that you would possibly need on that shipment. Somebody needs to be working on that while you're figuring out for sure if this load is stolen. Okay. So now we're at the point where it's stolen. What do I do from there?
Yeah. So the checklist is important, right? So we have one that we're building for TAPA that's going to be in the members resource room. You said you're going to attach one here. I've had one for a while, right? So I think that's critical. So that goes back to that plan. Who's gathering this information,
Yep.
right? And one of the things you can't do is tell law enforcement to hurry up and wait.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
First of all, if it's a strategic theft, let's go back to the 2 different types, right? If it's a straight theft, it's obviously going to be where it happened, right? If they stole it at the truck stop, whatever police jurisdiction that truck stop is at, right? That's going to be you're just going to call 911 right there. You're going to get it. Now, it's different depending on where you are, right? So
Yeah.
if you're at a truck stop in California and you call 911 and you get the police who have jurisdiction over that area for that straight theft, we're going to talk about straight theft first, right? Once you get that report, you want to take that report and you want to go to CTIPS, right? Which is the California Highway Patrol Task Force, right? So now that you have the local police report, you can go to CTIPS, you can go to that task force, and that task force will then grab that report and take jurisdiction over that case, and they'll start working that case, right? Or it's going to be the LA Sheriff's Department task force or the LAPD unit
Mhm.
that does it, their task force, right? So if you're in a state like California who has these different task forces, you need to know that. Your
Yep.
team needs to know that so that you can go beyond just the basic 911 level call and you can get it to somebody who's working cargo theft all day, every day. And as well as I do, those task forces out there, those units are fantastic. They do an
Amazing.
amazing job. They
Yeah.
do fantastic work. You just saw the article that just came out. I think it was 7 million recovered,
Yep.
stuff like that. They just do fantastic work,
It's
right?
yeah, it's crazy, and it's crazy how fast they are too. Like I in December, me just sending leads over there, they recovered 4 million for me. I mean, not for me, but like I
Yeah.
was like, hey, talk to these guys, four
Yeah.
million, and just with little old me sending people that way. I mean, it's
Yeah.
wild.
So, and same thing goes in New Jersey, right? And then you have Florida, you have the Florida statewide and the Miami-Dade task force, right? And so you have to know where these task forces exist, right? So if you're having a theft, and it's not coincidence that those task forces exist in some of the highest cargo theft states. So that's a good thing in the sense
Right.
that if you fall victim to a cargo theft in one of the highest states, you may have a resource that you can go to beyond the local call. So if it's a straight theft, it's wherever it occurred. Now, if we talk about a pilferage, which is a straight theft, this becomes really confusing. And this is why, in my opinion, pilferage is the most underreported cargo theft that we have today, because the bad guys have gotten really slick at the pilferages too, right? So now driver leaves California, they're headed to Texas. They get to Texas, they realize at the point of delivery that somebody along the way took 2 pallets off the back of the
Yeah.
truck, right? Now you have a problem. Those small regional crews that we talked about earlier, that we mentioned earlier, they were very sloppy about pilferage, right? They would cut the bolt seal off, they'd throw it on the ground, they'd take a couple pallets or boxes off the back. The driver would come out, see that the bolt seal's on the ground, nothing on the trailer, immediately call the police. It's the same thing as the one we just discussed. You're
Yeah.
calling 911, you're getting the local police. Well, now they cut the yellow bolt seal off the back, they take 2 pallets off, they put a yellow bolt seal back on the trailer. They don't throw anything on the ground, they pick it up, they put it in their pocket. So the driver just walks by, sees the yellow seal, right?
Yep.
And just gets in and goes. Now they get to the consignee. They've made 6 stops along the way. They
Right.
have
Who
no
knows?
idea where it happened. Who do you report that to? And you can't take a guess. You can't just guess and go, well, I stopped in, Albuquerque longer than any place else. So I'm going to report it to Albuquerque. They're not going to give you a report.
Right.
Or to be fair to them, nor should they.
Mhm.
You're just about to boost their crime numbers for something you can't even be sure happened there. So that becomes a real problem. That becomes a really difficult thing. And a lot of times it doesn't even get reported because of that, right? Because you don't know who to report it to and you can't make a report, right? You can maybe get an incident report. That's about the best you can do. But now if we talk about strategic theft,
Yep.
right? The
That's the hardest
jurisdiction,
one.
it is the hardest one
Yeah.
because it's confusing. It's really, once you hear this, it shouldn't really be that confusing, right? But it's basically where they took possession of the freight, and that's at
Okay.
the point of pickup,
Right.
right? So if you're a freight broker in Chicago and you book a carrier out of New York to go pick up a load in Georgia, and that load's going from Georgia to California, the point of pickup in Georgia is where you're going to file that police report because that's where the bad guys either arrived and picked up the freight or they tricked a legitimate trucking company to go and pick up the freight.
Hmm.
So it's when they take possession of that freight is when the theft actually happens. And so that's your jurisdiction. And it seems complicated at the moment, but it's really not that complicated. It's where possession is taken of the freight. Now, communicating that and explaining all that correctly, that's another difficult part of it, right?
Yeah. And I was gonna say, even with a cross dock, so let's say it's like a legitimate driver that brings it to a cross dock, then brings it to a bad driver from there, it would still be that first one because that first guy wasn't in on it. It was
Yeah.
technically theft
So
then.
technically, so we see incidents, right, where again, we go back to the California task force. They're great at, they might get a call from a cross dock who says, hey, I got some stuff on my dock that I think is stolen and
Right.
it's shady and everything like that. Now they'll get involved in that, but they still need that police report
Yes.
ultimately from where it was taken possession of so that they can act on it as stolen materials.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Interesting. Learning something new every day from you. Okay, so they file a report. So like you just said, I think also when you file the report, it's people do this part wrong. Very wishy-washy. I think this was stolen. I think this
I
going
don't have
back
any
and
of the
forth.
information. So you
Yeah.
go to get a checklist, right? You got to have, there's things that are on there that are nice to have or you can get later, but there are things on there you have to have,
Right.
right? Information on the truck at the point of pickup, driver's information, right? The information about the freight, the details on the freight, all the paperwork around that, the bill of lading, all that. You have to have that immediately
Right.
when you call the police. You can't be like, hey, I have a theft. I don't have any information on it right now. The other thing you can't do, you can't vomit information,
Yeah.
right? You can't just, especially if you're calling law enforcement in an area where they have not experienced cargo theft in the past. You can't call and try and say, well, we thought we booked ABC Trucking on this, and then turned out that they were, somebody impersonating a freight broker from, you name the country and blah, blah.
Right.
Don't go down that rabbit hole, right? Hey, we had somebody show up and steal freight at this location, right? They showed up, they pretended to be a legitimate person. They weren't. They stole the freight. Chief office has researched the criminal codes in that state before you call, right? A lot of times it's theft by deception, theft by conversion, things like that. You want to kind of know that, right? So you can
Hmm.
explain it to law enforcement. A lot of times I'll get people who say, well, I can't get law enforcement engaged. And my comment is, I never have difficulty getting law enforcement to want to be engaged, right? That's every time I talk to law enforcement, when you can make them understand the crime, they
Yeah.
won't be involved, right? It's when you're making such a garbled mess of it, 9 times out of 10, if you're making a garbled mess out of 9 times out of 10, when they don't want to get involved, it's because you're making such a mess out of the reporting and the description and like that, that they don't really know what's going on and they think it's a civil matter. They think you're having a dispute with a trucking company that
Yeah.
you don't want to pay or that wants more money or something like that. But when you can clearly define it to them and you can explain it to them, I've never had somebody say, I can literally tell you, I've never had somebody say, well, I'm not getting involved in that.
Yeah, which I have had people say that, but I
Mm.
think that's because this is way back when before I knew all the information. I think back then it was whenever I made a report, I was so flustered, didn't even know what to do I was so not prepared that when I was making a report, it was very much like well, you should have been here. And then, like you just said, totally
Well,
word
that's what I'm
vomited
saying,
all over
right?
'em.
So
Like I
if
was
you're
so,
making a mess of the reporting, then I
yeah,
can see that happening. But if you're not, and you say it to them in a way where they understand what the crime is,
yeah,
I
makes
always get
sense.
engagement.
Well, and I think having that checklist kind of goes back to that where if because it does happen, hopefully it's so rare in your company, this like never happens. you have something where you can just easily kind of read off of instead of having to be flustered. Cause yeah, that's what happened to me. So I
Yeah.
can
And
speak
this
on
goes
personal
back to
experience.
that, planning ahead,
Hmm.
right? Here's
Yep.
all the information we need. And listen, I would encourage you, especially if you're moving high target freight, get all that information before the truck leaves the dock, right?
Yeah.
Get all that information from the ship and communicate with your shipper. Work with your shipper on, hey, when ABC Trucking shows up at the dock, make sure you get the cell phone number for the driver. Make sure you
Interesting.
get pictures of the truck, pictures of the trailer, and can you send us copies of the paperwork? We need all this stuff. In case something were to go wrong, we want to be able to respond on your behalf quickly and
Yeah.
not delay, right? I've had people call me and 2, 3 weeks later, I'm still chasing them for the paperwork.
It's crazy.
You can't do that.
So real fast. So should it sometimes I've heard somewhere where it should be the shipper that technically makes the report, but a broker could technically do it too, right?
It's going to depend on the police department and the jurisdiction, right?
Okay.
Again, if somebody knows, like the California crews, they know, right? So
Yeah.
they'll take the report from the freight broker and stuff like that. But there have been jurisdictions where, or there have been places where they say, you're not the owner of the freight. The owner of the freight has to make the report, right? And sometimes you can hire somebody to go out on behalf, right? So you can you can hire a PI that understands cargo theft, right? Like
Mm,
I think you've had Pachuca on, right? You could hire Pachuca to go out. He's going to know exactly how to file that report for the shipper, right? Because let's say the shipper's in Georgia, they don't have anybody in California, or
yep.
they don't have anybody in Nevada, and they say, nope, somebody's got to come from the shipper. Well, you can hire that person sometimes, be a representative of the shipper and go file the report, right?
Interesting. Yeah. That makes sense. Cause I know sometimes shippers just don't even want to be involved at all, which I think that's a whole nother series that I did on shipper
Hopefully that's
relationships.
changing. I mean, I feel like that's changing a
I
lot.
feel
Not
like it is
completely.
too.
I'm not sitting here saying it's solved, but I'm saying I feel like that's been changing.
Especially if you have high value. I think that they've been hit enough where they know. But it's the ones who I don't think are high value that don't know yet. And we still have that, but we'll get there. We're getting there.
We'll
We're
get
making
there, right?
progress. I feel like we are. Okay. Held load hostage. So personal experience on this. I had two instances. One was when I did postal freight. Somebody tried to hold load hostage, and I was like, "Have fun! I'll have the FBI there in 1 second because you're dealing with federal mail." So that was really fun. And then number two was I had one where they were demanding a bunch more money. Whenever I did call the police and try to make a report, they definitely classified it as a civil matter, going back and forth on that. Really, they were refusing to make any type of delivery and completely hold it. So I think that is where it gets super fishy there. And then also we dealt with I can't even remember the carrier's name off the top of my head, but that 4th of July heist a while back where they held X amount it was like so many 40 loads or something
Oh
hostage
yeah.
for X amount of time. They had to pay
And
them
I think it was
20
an
grand.
anniversary, right? It was like a year after they had done it in the past, if I remember correctly on that case. I know a
Yeah.
couple of people that worked that case. The hostage load thing, hostage loads are weird, meaning they come in cycles, right?
Hmm.
We'll get a wave of them. And this has been going on for 10 years,
Yeah.
right? We'll get a wave of them where they're just like a daily occurrence. And that'll last for 6 months or a year. And then they just fall off the map
Yeah.
and they literally just almost disappear. And then 2 years later, they come back, and you get a wave of them again. Not to say you have none in between, but
Yeah.
it's
Very small.
very small, very infrequent, right? The problem with hostage loads now is almost the same thing as with the mechanical delays, right? Is 9 times out of 10 now, they are not legitimately holding your load hostage for money. They are just delaying you from reporting it as a theft,
Mm,
right? And so now they want you to call the police and talk to them about, hey, we have a driver holding a load hostage, because that almost immediately becomes a civil matter, right? We
yeah.
have a dispute with the driver over pay, right? That sounds like a civil matter. So what we're seeing now is when we get these hostage load things, most of the time they are not a hostage load. And I've even seen people pay and then they're out the money and the
Yep.
freight and everything like that, right? So first of all, my recommendation is not to pay unless you can physically have somebody go see the freight, stay with the freight until you can get the money there and get the freight turned over and everything like that, right? And I've done that in the past where I've had somebody go out, see the freight, be there and everything like that. And it really does turn out to be a dispute over, past bills owed or something like that. And that can all
Yeah.
get ironed out in some way, court, whatever. But I haven't had those in the past. But nowadays, what we're seeing is most of the time it's just a delay tactic to get you
Mhm.
24, 48, 72 hours out from the time of the theft. And now it's you're too far behind to make a recovery or anything like that. And
Right.
they never had any intent, right? But if you are trying to report this to law enforcement, again, don't go down the rabbit hole on it. It's a theft. They showed up. they impersonated somebody or they stole an identity and or they just showed up and they stole the load, right? And that's how you report it. This is a theft.
Yeah.
Don't get into the whole hostage load thing and everything that you report it as it's a theft, right?
Yeah. And then, because you can always say, the load did make it, I need to cancel it out. I mean, that's not considered falsifying a report because it could have been a theft
Right.
or whatever, right?
Right.
I mean, I think there's probably abusive, things that could happen that way, but yeah. Well, this has been super helpful. I know there's so many different avenues that you can go down, but we all talk about the different resources you just were talking about. So real fast, can you plug, because I think the TAPA thing is super interesting. And that's like the best way that I know of to really learn all the things that's not available online, because we all know we can't say all the things that we want to say, online because these guys hear it. So I guess explain exactly what TAPA does and how people should get involved and do the courses and all that stuff.
Yeah, TAPA is the Transported Asset Protection Association. There's three chapters. There's TAPA Americas, which I currently serve as the chairman of, TAPA EMEA, which is Europe, and TAPA APAC, which is the Asia Pacific region. And what we do, we're a nonprofit organization, and we create supply chain security standards and protocols and education for the industry. So there's no commercial angle to it. It's a bunch of volunteers like myself that sit on the board. Nobody's paid, and we have our executive assistant and everything like that are paid because we're all part-time volunteers, so we can't do it all day. But none of the board members are paid or anything like that. And we host the National Cargo Theft Summit. This year, it's going to be May 5th and 6th in Atlanta, Georgia, right? And that's the largest cargo theft summit in the nation. If you're a TAPA member, you can have 4 people come. Don't quote me on that, but I think you can have 4 people come as part of your membership for nothing. If you're not a member, you can pay to attend the conference. But it's the largest summit in the country for this. Enforcement from all the major task forces across the country, and usually some of the Canadian team will come down too. They attend that. So it's a great opportunity to network. But the national summit will usually concentrate on the problem, right?
Mhm.
And then we have the TAPA 2 summit, which this year will be in November in Phoenix. And the T2 summit is more about the solution. So it's about 80-20 problem for the national summit and then 80-20 solution to problem for the T2 conference, right?
Yeah.
Both of them are probably the 2 largest summits in the country. All the top experts attend these. You'll see shippers, brokers, carriers there. It's a great exchange, a great way to network. You're going to make a ton of resources. If you're a broker or a carrier or a shipper, you're going to do business there. We see people do business there successfully, and
Yep.
because they're finding other security-minded, like-minded people that are attending this conference, right? Things like that. So I would encourage you to join TAPA, have the transportation security requirements, the facility security requirements, the cyber security requirements, the freight broker security requirements. We're coming out with parking security requirements, and
Oh,
there'll be a
interesting.
couple others that are coming out. And we modify these, we update them every so many years, right? So you take the test, you get audited, you can get certified in that. And we're seeing shippers looking for freight brokers that are certified, seeing freight brokers looking for truckers that are certified. So I think this makes for great networking, great use of resources and time. So I would encourage everybody to come to that for sure.
And I will be there, so they can meet
Yeah.
both of us. Yeah.
Yeah, you go to tapaonline.org and you can find out about the conferences and the membership. And for members, we have webinars, we have the resource room, we have our law enforcement committee, we have webinars that we host and things like that, all free for members.
So awesome. I love that part. I gotta figure out how to be involved in that, Scott. You gotta hook me up because I want to
Come
be
on,
part of it.
you
I
need
know.
committee members. Come on,
Good. I'll definitely do it. Okay,
good.
cool. Well, let's wrap it up. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I think this will be like the last one of the whole series, so I'll do a little recap on everything. But I
Yeah,
appreciate your time. You're the best.
I'm glad we got to do it. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was good to see you.
I know. Good to see you. And that is a wrap on the 5-course mini series of cargo theft. I had the amazing Scott Cornell on with us. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed, learned so much from him every single time I talk to him. I always feel like I know all the things, and then I talk to him and I always learn something different. If you guys didn't catch the Trojan horse new term that he brought out in the What is Cargo Theft on episode 1, freaking what? This is wild. He's been predicting the future. It's like he's a wizard or something. But anyways, this a whole series has been really great. I appreciate Scott so much for doing this. So shout out to him and TAPA for all the resources and stuff that they give to the industry. And so, anyways, be sure to share this over to as many people as you guys can. I'll be doing like a little playlist of this, so it'll be an easy way to just share the whole playlist. Hopefully, you guys see that this is something that really everybody should learn about in all different capacities. Thanks, everybody.